What's up YouTube? Welcome back to this OSCP preparation series where we shall be going through OSCP like VMs. In this video we shall be going through the box boot made by Howard from the channel IT Security Labs based off his experience with the OSCP and in real life. So without any further ado, let's get into it. This may not look like Kali Linux because I don't want it to. I prefer making it look like Windows, but this is our Inmap Scan. As you can see, we have a couple of ports open, the typical port 21, port 22, port 80, and port 3306. I personally hadn't dealt with port 3306 until now, but yeah, it's a learning experience and that's what we're here for. So based off the Inmap Scan, we do not have anonymous login. We can trust Inmap that it actually gave us the correct results, right? But at the same time, we could try it for ourselves. If I remember the IP address, and if I can type. No, that's not how you spell anonymous. So I'll just exit out of this if it allows me to, and I will try this again. There we go. And yeah, we don't have anonymous login, right? So I'll just clear my screen, go back to the Inmap results, and we can skip port 22 because we shall need credentials or something for that, and port 80 and port 3306 that we need to look at. And personally, I would have started with port 80, which is what you should do. I recommend, yes, because one of the only things we can do with MySQL is log in, which means we need credentials or brute force, right? And we don't want to start by brute forcing because that makes a lot of noise. And when you're in a client environment, you might take down servers or something if you brute force, right? So we could leave that to the end, just in case we don't find anything. Right, so okay, so we shall go to port 80. I shall be sending my traffic through Burp Suite because I'm having trouble with the machine. I have no idea why, but as you can see, you have a login page, and straight off the bat, there's a couple of things you can do. You can try default credentials, which probably won't work unless it's that easy. Forward, and it says invalid username or password. Right, we could also try a bunch of different username password combinations, but that's not going to get us anywhere. Another thing we could try is SQL map, right? See if we could inject something into this, and the syntax we'd use would be forms, and then we call it just to see what's there, and then we'd submit whatever data we want. Username equals password, and username equals admin and password equals password, like this. So you could copy and paste that into SQL map and try to see if you could exploit SQL injection, which in this case won't work either. So I did a couple of other tests, the typical go buster and all that, and I didn't find anything. So the next thing I thought about was brute forcing, which is probably the last thing you want to do, but this is also like OSCP preparation, which is like a CTF. So it might be the actual path you need to take, and in this case it was. So what I did was I used hydra to brute force MySQL, and in this case it's a bit dumb, and I see why people say CTFs aren't as realistic, because the username is quite tricky. So you could make a short word list, call it users, put admin, root, MySQL, and save that, and then we have a text file for the passwords. I'll use rocky.txt, which is something I kind of always use. So we could use hydra, capital L, since we have a user file, and then a capital P for the passwords. And now I have to look for rocky.txt and IP address. Is it IP address first? We shall see. In MySQL, and once we run this, we should get a password and a username. And like I said, you could have just guessed the username at this point, but since we don't know what the username is, we shall just use those usernames. Now I'm repeating myself, and I'll just shut up and wait for this to finish. Okay, so this hydra thing was taking a while, so I just tried to speed it up by switching out the usernames, admin and root, so that this can actually take a lot less longer, and it should take a few seconds, hopefully, and we'll have the password. Okay, as you can see, we have a password. The password is Rocky. I was about to say root. The username is root. So we could. Okay, we are in MySQL, and what we want to do is show databases. If I can stop fingering everything and type properly. And what we want to use is website, not user. No tables. Okay, we have a table users, and we want to select everything from users. Boom, we have a password hash and a username. Okay, this looks like a weird password hash, but if you have any experience with cracking hashes, this should look familiar. What we can try first is hash identifier, right? And this does not recognize what this is. So I will go to the interwebs, and we shall look for an online hash identifier. And we should just use the first three just to make sure they all say the same thing. Because if they say the same thing, then we are pretty sure we have the correct hash, right? And I just analyze, and we have a bcrypt hash. It says bcrypt, right? We shall try that here again. Include all possibilities, and this is bcrypt blowfish, which is kind of the same thing, I think. Don't quote me on that. And this one is taking a while. Oh, my bad. It says bcrypt. These are examples, bro. Nah, bro. I don't know why this one's taking a while, but our hash is a bcrypt hash, right? So I'll put this away. And so usually when I'm cracking hashes, I use hashcat and John, because sometimes John works, sometimes hashcat works. It just depends on the hash, right? But in this case, when I have funny formats like bcrypt, I use John, because John kind of takes less time, I guess, from my experience, to crack these funny formatted hashes. For me, it says no passwords left to crack because I already did that. So show, and this is the password, and our username is Adrian. So we shall go back to our Inmap Scan, and as you can see, we have 3 places we could use these credentials: FTP, SSH, and that login page on port 80. Right, so we shall go in order of the ports. We shall try FTP first, and we shall try the username Adrian. Paste in that password Tiger. Cross our fingers. That did not work. Right, so we can try SSH. If I can spell Adrian. Paste in the password Tiger. Fingers crossed. That did not work either. But we haven't lost all hope. We shall go back to the interwebs and try this thing out. I don't know if it should be Adrian capital or small letter. I don't know if it works, but apparently it does. Okay, and this is welcome back, Adrian. Your log file is ready for viewing, and we shall view that log file. I don't know if I told you why I'm using Burp Suite. It's because my VM's dead and it's not working. None of the resources are loading if I don't proxy my stuff to Burp Suite, but that's because I just decided to start recording a video. It usually does not do that. We have just one line of logs, and I'm wondering what this is because I have no idea what this is. So it's either SSH, FTP, or the actual log of the website, right? So we can confirm this by trying all the services again, and we shall use some really bogus stuff so that we actually know that we actually put this. So for FTP, we are going to use please subscribe, and then we shall type in we shall type in thanks for the password, right? Unique stuff for each service. So FTP, we use please subscribe, and we shall view the log file again just to see if that changed. And apparently it did. So this is an FTP log. And at this point, you might be like, okay, this is FTP. This is an FTP log. What can I do with it? And if you are like me, who skipped Cyber 2021, I did some of the stuff and all of it, you'd be confused because you would have probably skipped the log poisoning part. And that's what it is. You're supposed to poison the log and get a web shell, and then from the web shell you get LCP. So I'm gonna pull up an article, the one I used, FTP log poisoning, and it should either be that one or this one. I'm not too sure. It is definitely not this one. This is it. This is the article I used, and he goes through a lot of detail, right? Shout out to Jerry. He talks about RCE, LFI, water logs, and he talks about what this log file is. And he mentions that this is the default log file for FTP, right? Basically, it keeps track of the login activity or failed login attempts on the FTP server. You can go through the whole thing. I'll link it in the description below. But basically, we're supposed to inject a payload to poison this log, and this is the payload, and we shall get a web shell from this, right? So we shall go back to our terminal so that we can actually do that. And FTP, it is PHP system $_ get. I sometimes forget this command, to be honest, but it's looking okay so far. Yeah, this should be it. Use that as the username, and then random password. That doesn't really matter, but we should have a web shell at this point. There's a bunch of things you can try to. We can view the logs and forward this, and as you can see, it doesn't seem like anything happened. But if we view the logs again and Control R to send this to the peer, Control Shift R to follow, just make this full screen. So there's two places we can try see if our web shell worked. So first is the parameter, which would be ncmd equals to ls, to see what directory it might be in. And we don't see any output that might be interesting, so that did not work. So I shall move to here, the endpoint for the request, and I'll just paste that and see if that actually works. Send this through, and apparently, we have a directory listing, config index, and so that worked. We have a web shell, right? We can see who we are. We're probably gonna be data, and we are data. Now what we want to do is escalate this into an actual reverse shell, right? We could exploit the machine this way, but that would take way too long. So I'm gonna just look for this bash one-liner. Okay, I have the bash one-liner. I'm just put my IP address here. Oh, what's my favorite port? 9001. Yes, sir. All right, so we can't just send this like this. We need to URL encode it, or use what's called the Linux IFS, which would be $ curly brace. I can find the curly brace IFS. This would be used in place of the spaces, right? That could work, but I'm not going to do that. Oh my goodness. I am going to use URL encoding, but firstly I need to set up a listener. We have a listener open, and what we need is burp suite, not this. So URL encode this, Control U, send it through, and apparently it did not hang because it did not work. So you could be like, oh, that's not going to work, this is not the desired path, but it is. You need to tweak a little bit. Get used to tweaking stuff so that it works. Like I said in the last video, do stuff maybe 5 or 6 times, and then you can conclude that it did not work. Because in this case, this is how you're supposed to do it. You're just supposed to throw it into bash C. But I will decode this, Control Shift U, so that I just encode everything in one go, and that does not get encoded twice, right? And if we send this, it should give us a shell. And as you can see, it's hanging, so we did get a shell. And we have a shell here, and the first thing I need to do is stabilize this shell, Python 3, and we hope that it has Python 3, which it does because that worked. And then background that, paste that, and we have a stable shell, right? Ls, who am I? We are www data, and as you can see, there's a config file, and if you ever see a config file that you can actually read that config file, as you can see, we can read it because we own it, and it has a password and a username. So we could try use this to log into MySQL, which would be trivial because we already have the root user's password, and so we would just be degrading our privileges in MySQL. So we could try use it with SSH. Adrian, and if it's this easy, we shall be happy. Using the password, but apparently it's not. So exit at that, and from here you could try start your enumeration, right? To privest from www data to a user, and we can check the users in the home directory. If I can type, that is, we have Adrian, and Adrian seems to be the only user. Cat Etsy. I have no idea what happened there. Yeah, Adrian is the only user here that we can see apart from root, who also has, apart from root. And so we shall get into Adrian's home directory. And one thing you want to do is LSLA, so that you actually see what's in this, because there are files like this that are hidden that might give you some stuff. So we shall read everything here before we move on. Right, cat the reminder, and it says rules best of 64 plus exclamation and a random word at the bottom. Right, we shall keep that in mind. We shall try cat the user file, which we don't have permission to read. We don't have permission to read that punch. CD into FTP, LSLA, CD into file, LSLA, and as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff in here. You can ignore this PSPY64 because I'm the one that put it there. I just didn't delete it from previous testing, I forgot. But anyways, we have this nodes and we have a script. So we could try cat both things, and we cannot cat it out. Script, and we can't read that. So we really need to escalate privileges. And from what I did, I ran my linps, and then that didn't really bring up anything, because as you can see, if we at the cron tab, there are no cron jobs that seem to be running. But the reason why I have PSPY64 here is because if you run this tool, right, it'll show you whatever processes are running, even the root processes, right? So it's a very useful thing to see if there's actual cron jobs running, because this might not be as reliable. And from my experience with this box, it's not reliable because it says there are no cron jobs, and you're just going to conclude, oh, there are no cron jobs, but you didn't do enough to see if there actually are any cron jobs running, any scripts running in the background that you may not be aware of, right? So once we run this PSPY, you can let it sit for 5-10 minutes just to see whatever runs, and then you can stop it and redo the output. So I'll just let this sit for like 2 minutes until we actually see what we need to see. Okay, I've let this run for a bit, and as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff that could potentially give us an elevated role in this machine. This is us jumping onto the system. We would have been caught by, you know, the people monitoring the network, because this was pretty popular. So don't do this in the wild. And scrolling down, you can see that we have apparently another root password to the MySQL database, which we could try use to escalate privileges, but that's not going to work. But we could also try use this password to spray it around to see if we can switch to user Adrian or root, right? Try su, paste it there, and it doesn't work, right? But the interesting thing here is this. There's this thing, this line here. There's a script running that is in root, and it's called checkin.sh. And it's reading from somewhere. It's reading this, which says punched in at 1651. And we don't know what that is yet, because we need to escalate privileges. So we shall escalate, and then we'll come back to this. But if you remember that reminder, this best of 64 exclamation Hebrew, right? I have no idea what that means. This is typical CTF stuff. Typical CTF stuff. And if you don't know what this could have been, you would have been stuck and you're like, oh, I couldn't get root on the box, right? Probably would have gotten half the points. Probably would have gotten half the points in the OSCP. And maybe you wouldn't have passed, but it's okay. I'm gonna tell you what it is. This is hashcat, right? Hashcat rules. Best of 64. And I'll show you how to use this. So we shall open up a new terminal here, make that bigger, and what we're supposed to do, I'm gonna just cap the command because it's pretty long. What we're supposed to do is take this hashcat best of 64 rule file and append an exclamation mark to this word. I saved this word in a file called pass.txt, and then this is the syntax. We're going to be using the best of 64 rule to append the exclamation mark to the pass file, and we'll pipe that out. We'll output that to a list called passlist.txt. And the way we need to append, you couldn't just type this out, right? Because the way we need to append is this way, $exclamation mark. If you had just typed $exclamation mark here, it wouldn't have worked. So you put that in a file. So if you let this run, it gives you the pass list file, right? It'll hang for a minute, and depending on how much RAM you have, it'll hang for a while, right? For me, it hung for a couple of seconds, maybe 20. A lot. But this is what you get from the file, right? Let me just zoom in on this. This is what you get from the file, a word list. And if you pipe that to WC, you can see that there's 77 lines. And so you could try brute force FTP, which would be useless since you have actual access to the machine, or brute force SSH, which is the way to go, right? So hydra, and we know we are trying to get to the user Adrian, so we shall use the user Adrian, and this is the syntax SSH that I use. Let me just use tag I so that it does not wait. That is not tag I. There we go. And hopefully we get a password back in a couple of seconds or minutes. Ooh, boom, we have a password. So we could copy this. Don't forget to keep notes, by the way. So now what we want to do is SSH into this machine. And we have SSH access, which is pretty neat. So from here, we can get the user file, which is halfway there, reboot. I have no idea what sort of reference that is, but that is the user file. You would have half the points in the OSCP, which is, yeah, you'll be on your way to passing, right? But that is not all of it. We need to get root access. So we have already used this reminder. What we want to do now is get into this FTP folder and see what it has for us. But before we do that, we also have a file we can read called punch, right? There we go. And it says punched in at 1650, 1651, 1652. And if you remember from this, oh, I closed the door. That is so dumb of me. So if you remember from here, right, we have this punched in at 1651. If you remember from our PSPY, there's this punched in at 1651. Right? So we can safely assume that this script that is running from the root directory is reading what's in this punch in file, right? Exactly what it is. So now that we know that this checkin.sh script is reading from our punch in file, we can poison this, and there seems to be a lot of poisoning going on in this machine. And so we could read what's in this FTP file. Directory lsla. We can cat the dot notes, and it says that silly admin, he's such a micromanager, wants me to check in every minute by writing on my punch card. He even asked me to write the script for him. Little does he know I'm planning my revenge. So we know that Adrian wrote the script, and he's planning some sort of revenge against this admin who's a micromanager, apparently. But that is our way to prevest, and this is the script. This is the script Adrian wrote, and it's reading that punch in file. So what we need to do is poison this punch in file and hopefully get a shell. We could do that, or we could either get a shell from this punch in file by poisoning it, or we could make it give us root access by copying the bash binary, which then keeps the privileges of the root user, right? So we can handle punch, and what we need to do is think of a way to prevest. So I'm gonna choose to do the copying thing, the binary, bin bash, copy bin bash to temp, and I'll call it bash with 2 H's, and so that we get to use the privileges of this binary as root. Since the root user is reading this file, we shall give it SUID binary privileges. So we shall chmod plus s temp, our bash with 2 H's. So once we do this, we can go into the temporary directory and see if it has actually worked. So here, I'll just go into temp lsla, and as you can see, there's nothing in this temporary directory. And I'll just save this here. We can ls here again, ls, give it a couple seconds. And as you can see, I can see it here, but I cannot see it in here. That's kind of odd. But anyways, it's all good. Maybe the temp directory from SSH is different from the one that's used by data. I have no idea, but it is now in here, and what we can do now is execute it. So we shall cd into temp and execute bash, but we need to append the tag p, which will make us use it as an SUID binary, and it will keep the root privileges. And once we press enter, we should see that £sign, and we see that £sign, which is a good thing because we are root. We can cat the root.txt. Caesar wasn't the only one that was betrayed by the boot. I still have no idea what reference that was for, but that is the machine, everybody. If you'd like to see another one of these and see how well we're progressing in our OC preparation, you can click on the next video and you'll see and learn from the next box that we do. Until then, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.